Alright, so Dragon Ball Sparking Zero has been out for a couple weeks now, and your boy wanted to take his sweet time absorbing all this game had to offer, and now I feel pretty confident in giving my review for this game, and whether or not I think it is truly a worthy continuation of the Budokai Tenkaichi series, which is why I am very late on this review, but hey, I'm here now, let's talk about it. And of course, be sure to like and subscribe if you guys enjoy. We just passed 600 subs on our way to the big 1K. I really appreciate the support. So I think the easiest way to kind of cover and review this game is going through each kind of portion of what the game offers and talk about them in specifics. Some sections, of course, will take longer than others because I have more to say on some sections than others. But let's go ahead and get into it, talking about some general things that every game has. So starting off with some smaller general stuff, we got the soundtrack. Overall, I think it's actually pretty solid. You have a list of relatively iconic tracks you can buy more in the shop, and the DLC also has a music pack that you get with the Ultimate Edition of the game if you want to buy that. Overall, though, I think those two things are pretty needed to give this soundtrack the boost it needs, so I think generally speaking I prefer both BT2 and 3 soundtracks a bit more. But this isn't bad at all. Moving on to a more essential part of fighting games, we have these stages, and like the soundtrack, solid but nothing that impressive. You get 12 stages in total, with some having a day cycle setting. If you wish to play split screen, you only have one option, being the hyperbolic time chamber, which definitely is a bummer, but hey, at least it's there. The biggest positive in my eyes is how destructive some of these stages are. It adds a level of fun to every fight, but admittedly, compared to the 40 stages I believe Naruto Storm 4 had, another anime arena fighter, it is something this game is definitely lacking. Alright, next up we have characters, and I mean, it's a Dragon Ball Budokai Tenkaichi game, so yeah, the roster is great. We know DLC is on the way, but essentially every character of relevance from DBZ, Super, GT, and the movies are present in this game. Now, there are some noteworthy exclusions, like no one from the original Dragon Ball series, and characters like Pikkon and Super 17 are absent, but overall this is a very good roster. Yes, there is similarity in playstyles, and yes, if you cut out transformations and the like, the number does go down, but even when you do that, the roster is still very good. So no big complaints on my end involving the roster, although yes, Pikkon, Super 17, OG Dragon Ball characters, their absence is noticeable because they were in BT2 and BT3, so consider that, I guess, a reduction in that regard. But with a 182 size roster, I think there's more than enough variety to keep players happy. Okay, next up, let's talk about the UI and graphics, and this will be very short because I think both are very good. In terms of UI, I think your health and your resources are very distinct. You can easily glance at them and you can automatically find the thing you're looking for, which I think is very important in a relatively fast-paced game like this. Character models overall are very solid, but of course there are some off ones, but in motion everything looks very good in my experience. And even when the screen gets cluttered with explosions and whatnot, in fights it still looks great, and all those effects give that anime and honestly also like a comic book feel, which is very good for someone like me who's a big comic book fan. So moving on down the list, we got customization and collecting items. So the game featured customization. I didn't spend too much time with this, but from what I gathered and seen in the shop, the variety seems to be somewhat lacking. Many things I saw were just like destroyed versions of different character outfits. Moving on to more collector type items, though, you have a variety of titles and banners and the like you can earn by playing characters or buying them in the shop. You also have this collection from Whis and Zeno, if that's your sort of thing, so the game seems to have a decent amount for you completionists out there, which can net you things like more Zenny, special banners, etc. Okay, moving to more important stuff though, we have the game mode, and in this regard, pretty solid. You got the story mode, which we will dive into further in a moment, standard battles that are offline or online, custom battles that can be uploaded so others can play, and world tournaments. Custom battles is admittedly the mode I spent the least amount of time with, so I won't really be addressing it much, but from what I saw, it seemed to have a decent amount of customization options, and of course, be prepared for people to make their weird thoughts realities. As for World Tournament, I really like it. You can play offline and online, and there are a variety of tournament types you can play and set rules of your own. So overall, I think this is a very nice inclusion that kind of gives players another option besides the standard fights. You also got non-fighting related stuff like the Encyclopedia, where our favorite ladies give some funny commentary on the roster, and this is definitely a nice inclusion. You're going to get the sense the devs love Dragon Ball from this feature, as some lines are just absolutely hilarious. This love is also shown in the character intros before the fight starts and on the character select screen itself. So many great lines, and I found myself mixing and mashing combos of characters to see what they would say to each other. My only issue, of course, is the fact that intros are not skippable, and although this is a minor thing, every other fighting game gives you the option to do so. So not having it in this game is annoying because sometimes I want to get straight into throwing hands. Alright, so before we start talking about the actual gameplay of Sparking Zero, there's one other thing I want to mention, and that is the controls. And let's just say I don't really like them. You have two pre-built control options in Standard and Classic for BT old heads like myself. And both are fine, I guess. I just find it odd that you can't fully map the controls to your liking. I mean, sure, you can map some things like your skills and blast, but even then is very restrictive. Some may feel this is a nitpick, but think about it. Every modern fighting game, and really games generally, have the option to change the controls to whatever you want, and so when I found out how restrictive Sparking Zero was, it was pretty jarring, especially in a game that can be pretty fast-paced, with back and forth action. I would think giving the player complete control the way they want would be an easy option to have in this game. But finally, we got the gameplay. Overall, I am very pleased. Many returning mechanics from prior titles and some new stuff as well, all ranging from easy to pull off mechanics to things that require tight timing. It feels very responsive overall, and for what they were going for, I think they nailed it. As I don't get bored, especially since the mechanics interact with each other and resources to create a back and forth battle that I think Dragon Ball should have. And pretty much all my issues are pretty character specific, like Yajirobe, After Image Strike, and although yes, this is not a competitive game, these things I would easily argue hurt the game on even a casual level. In terms of general gameplay mechanics though, I like the idea of Super Counter and even the classic Vanish Wars and Z Counter, but I do think they happen a lot and make many matches into a rhythm game more than anything, where games can come down to just who does these two things better. But as I said before, I'm very pleased with the gameplay. I am never bored when I play this game, and I don't think you will be either. Okay, so that's all the general stuff out the way. Now let's get a breakdown of the different modes that the game offers, starting with Story Mode. This is the primary single-player content that the game offers, and it definitely has its highs, but also its lows. Let's go ahead and talk about it. So, a couple things to note about the Story Mode first. It treats itself as a POV style where you play a variety of characters like Goku, Gohan, Frieza, and the like, and play through the story of Dragon Ball through their perspective. In addition to the original story everyone knows and loves, Sparking Zero also offers a variety of what-if scenarios if you complete certain conditions in battle. These range from a simple story beat to a full-on story change, or sparking episode as they call it, where you essentially get to experience how your actions would affect the story at large. So, what do I dislike about this? My biggest issue with the story mode is the general presentation of it. Sparking Zero tells its story through a combination of still images, essentially slideshows, and camera interactive cutscenes, and I gotta say, this just didn't do it for me, especially the first two. Although the camera interactive cutscenes were very nice and did give me some cool perspective on some key moments in the story, it wasn't that big of a deal to me. The fact they switch between these three methods of storytelling becomes very jarring at times, particularly during sections where a given character doesn't have many fights in an arc, so they are essentially playing catch-up, and even then they skip over quite a bit, which admittedly was probably bound to happen with this POV story style. Now of course you have the option to skip, but that option doesn't excuse a pretty lazy way to tell a story. Like, it's literally just still images for the most part, which is just weird in my opinion. And I would easily argue that in terms of telling the story of Dragon Ball, the previous games just do it better. Next complaint is very minor, so I won't spend that much time on it, but I think there could have also been more creative ways to unlock the what if and sparking episode stories. Many of them kind of just boil down to beat your opponent very quickly. Again, not a big deal, but I do think more creativity could have been used there. Now, if you've been on social media and seeing people talk about the game, many have criticized the story mode for being too hard. You've probably have seen the Great Vegeta discourse that happened a while back. And while I think a simple response of get good can easily be stated, I do think some fights are pretty tough. For example, when you have to 1v5 the Ginyu Force in a Goku what if story. However, overall, the story mode in my opinion was kind of a steamroll, and this is primarily due to sparking mode. In short, the AI has no idea how to handle it, and essentially any quote-unquote hard fight can easily be handled with it in my experience. Okay, got my complaints out of the way. What's good about this? Well, I already mentioned it, and those are the sparking episodes and what if scenarios. They really fleshed out these stories and gave some pretty hype moments, and even do things that many fans wanted. Of course, my dislike for the general presentation hurts a bit, but these stories were so creative that I completely forgot about that complaint, at least for the most part. Of course, we have played through the story of Dragon Ball many times over, but you will be more than willing to do so again to get a chance to experience these new stories. I think they absolutely nailed it here, and it is arguably the best part of this game. Okay, so I talked about what might be the best part of this game, being the sparking episodes, but let's talk about what might be the worst, which is the training mode, and tutorials, but more so the training mode. So for my experienced fighting game players out there, this training mode definitely does something different in its strategy system. You can select a variety of pre-built strategies and also get more from the shop. and these essentially just make the CPU do different things. There's one to spam rush attacks, key blasts, counters, etc. The best way I can put this training mode is the more you want to use it, the less accessible it gets. Like the more unique and niche interactions you want to practice against, the more problems this training mode has. This training mode would simply kill for a record and play feature. Not to mention, it is very annoying that when you are in training mode online, you can't pause the matchmaking, and even worse, each time you get out of a match and return to the training mode, all of your settings will go back to the default. Now let me say, I don't like people comparing games like Sparking Zero to more traditional fighters without any additional context, but let's be clear, no matter what type of fighting game you are playing, traditional, 2D, 3D, platform, arena, a training mode has one simple purpose: to effectively practice and learn the game, and this training mode barely accomplishes this goal beyond a surface level, and even then it is missing some bare minimum things that training modes in other fighting games have. You can't even change your control settings in training mode, you have to go out into the character select screen. Oh, and once more, the strategy system may be unique and all, but it doesn't actually even work. For example, I used the perception strategy, and you would think this just means the opponent just uses their perception. They just hold down the perception button. Makes sense, right? That's literally what the strategy says. But then they do this weird thing where they just move around and then randomly press perception. Like, why? Like, that's not what I want, ladies and gentlemen. So even in the strategy system, you're not even going to get the things that you necessarily want, which is definitely a bummer. So they don't even really accomplish the thing that they were going for. Okay, as for tutorials, sadly the same thing can be said, although fighting games notoriously have bad tutorials, so comparatively it's not that bad. There is a decent quantity of tutorials ranging from beginner to advanced, and it does go through just about everything the game has to offer, but again, it's pretty bare minimum. And when you boot up the game, you actually get a very brief tutorial on top of that, and yeah, that's as bare bones as it gets. So we have a game that doesn't do a good job in teaching you how to play it, and barely gives you the tools to learn how to play it yourself. In my eyes, this is easily where Sparking Zero lacks the most. Okay, we talked about more so the single player stuff. Let's talk about the online now. This is for the multiplayer heads out there that are not interested in playing the story mode. They're interested in giving people the hands. And I gotta say, once again, like the story mode has its highs, has its lows. Let's talk about it. First up, we gotta talk about the netcode, and if you've played traditional fighting games, it is kind of just your run-of-the-mill delay-based netcode, and when it works, and when it doesn't, you're ready to throw your monitor. Now, in my experience, which has been roughly 200 matches at time of recording, split between both ranked mode options, I only encountered a truly unplayable match 4 times, which is pretty good. Honestly, the netcode is whatever overall. It just sucks when it comes to super counter and Z counter advantage wars, in my opinion, which are things that require somewhat tight timing, and it changing from match to match and sometimes mid-match is certainly annoying, especially as these are 2 key defensive mechanics that often decide a lot of games once you get past like B rank. Additionally, the player base is pretty strong. I played the game on PC and I rarely got the same opponent twice, but of course this may be better or worse if you play on one of the consoles. At the time of recording, there is also this weird thing that happens where control schemes flat out change, which is very annoying. It doesn't happen all the time, but when it does, it kills the experience for me, as I feel like I don't have full control of my character. I didn't encounter it, but there was also reportedly a bug that prevents people from switching in DP mode. I already can't change the controls to exactly what I want to, so don't mess it up for me further. Now, I alluded to this before, but you get 3 online options in single battles, DP battles, and world tournament battles. Personally, I think most people will like DP battles the most, as it has by far the most character variety present, due to many insane characters being high on the set DP total of 15 per team. Now, that doesn't mean the mode is without flaws. Many of my games, once I hit B rank, were going to timer consistently, which is saying something, as the timer is pretty lenient, and this is due to many things mentioned before, like Yajirobe, afterimage characters, and certain defensive mechanics that draw out these games for a little too long for my liking. As for single battles, although they are very cool, they are essentially just fusions and UI Gokus, which again you would probably expect for a game like this, but that gets repetitive and old very quickly, and that happened to me by the time I got to B rank as well. And then of course lastly you got World Tournament, which again is exactly as it sounds. Now I will say this, you do rank up pretty quickly overall in my opinion, but I did find it weird how rank points were determined. Of course the higher ranked player you beat, the more points you gain, but you would think it would be more than what you actually earn. For example, when I was B2 in singles, I played someone at A2, which is 10 ranks higher than me, and I only got 20 more points than when I beat someone at my own rank. Not a big deal, but it did kind of throw me off a little bit, but overall, if you are on a winning streak, you'll rank up pretty quickly. Of course, ranked matches aren't the only online experience. You do have casual online, which is exactly as it sounds. You create a room, you can join with friends and the like, and if you played other fighting games, it's essentially just the same. And that's essentially all this game has to offer. After damn near 20 years, Budokai Tenkaichi is back, and overall, it is the game old fans wanted and one new fans can certainly enjoy. It looks good, it plays good, and it has enough content and variety to keep players happy for quite a long time. I would easily say this game is worth the $70 price tag, and although we don't have a ton of info on the DLC at the time of recording, I feel comfortable saying other additions are worth it to hardcore Dragon Ball fans and Budokai Tenkaichi veterans. However, in 2024, I think some things that have become staples this game took for granted, and trust me, they are noticeable when you come across them. Lackluster training mode, only serviceable enough online, lack of controller mapping, lackluster story mode presentation, and pretty mediocre stage count and soundtrack put Sparking Zero noticeably behind other arena fighting games and even prior Dragon Ball titles. Now, keep in mind, a patch is supposedly coming addressing the glitches and apparently Yajirobe, which, side note, the fact that he's the first character to get adjusted is just hilarious. But anyway, some issues mentioned in this review are looking to be fixed in time. However, even in this current state, there is easily more good than bad when it comes to Sparking Zero, and if you are a fan of Dragon Ball and more particularly Budokai Tenkaichi, then you probably will let a lot of this slide as the game gives you the feeling you have been dying to have again, as it did for me. However, the negatives cannot be ignored if we're judging this game critically, and although some issues are small, there are enough of them for them to become noticeable. And for this reason, we're going to clock Dragon Ball Sparking Zero in at an 8 out of 10. Maybe when DLC and potential patch rolls around fixing some of the issues, this game could be higher, but right now I'm very comfortable giving it this rating. But hey, those are just my thoughts. Leave down in the comments below, what are your thoughts about Sparking Zero? Are you enjoying the game? What are your issues with it? What do you love about it? And be sure to like and subscribe if you guys enjoyed. This is The Average Gamer signing off. Thank you guys for watching.